Hello, everybody. I am hoping that you can all hear me and that that you can also see me and see the slides. What I'll do is I'll just chat for the next minute or so till I know that there are people who are here. So if you can hear me, click like on the video or give us a comment. Anything to know that there are people who are definitely hearing and seeing would be great. If you are watching this on replay, and I know that many of you will be, it's quite warm outside this morning, so if you are out for a walk or you've got some sports activities, then just let us know on hashtag replay that you are watching this on replay, so that we're aware. Okay, so as I said, I'll just give it a few moments just to make sure that people are here. I can see that there's a lot of people who are watching. I just want to make sure that you can hear me. So if you can hear me, please let me know in the comments. Give me a like. I think someone just has, and then I will know that I can start. It's a little bit unusual. I often have someone at the end of the end of Facebook Messenger telling me, perfect. Saba's just commented to say that everyone can hear us well. Perfect. So one of the things that comes up quite often in the group is as we start to get to a couple of months before 11 plus for year 5 parents, and also for year 4 parents as well, that there might be a couple of bits where maybe it starts getting a bit tricky in math. And so I thought I would set up this Facebook live session. And if you're watching this as a student, I've got a load of questions that I put out just last night. They are available. I'll pop them in the chat if need be. But I'm also going to go over them today. So if you're a student and you're watching this, those questions are quite tricky, and there's some technique behind them. There's also some tips and tricks behind them. So I'm going to go through the tips and tricks first, and then I will go through the questions and the question answers. And I'm hoping to be able to do that so you can see my working as well. Now, my working isn't the best working. It is a way that I work it out. And I always say to people, when it gets to this point, your working and someone else's working may look different, but it's about what works for you, and it's not about necessarily what works for them. Now, there are some caveats for that. If your method isn't getting the right answers, then your method's not the right one. If your method is taking you hours to do, then again, you might look to change. And that's where I'm starting to put some of the teaching this morning. Okay, so I'm sure that many of you would have seen me in the group. I typically do the wow words, but I represent the Education Hotel and another company called Top School and Uni. But just a kind of a little bit, I suppose, about me. I'm actually a qualified science teacher. So I sit more on the math and science area, despite the fact that I do the wow words for the group. The reason I do the wow words is I really love vocabulary. So it's kind of that chance for me to be able to do vocab. I typically, when I deal with 11 plus and 13 plus, I will deal with the most selective schools. I work with tweens and teens, and I'm also a guardian for a teenager. So she is 15, and I am her academic and personal guardian. So a little bit about me that you might not know. But what we're looking at today is really how do we improve our scores on math without panicking, I think, is the big thing. And one of the big things is really confidence. But how can you become more confident is something that's a little bit trickier. So if you are in year 5, and if you're in year 4 and you're watching this and you're thinking, okay, this might not apply to me, it definitely does. These are things that you need to watch out for the whole way through doing 11 plus. But if you're doing year 5, then you might see that this is something which you are coming across now in terms of papers. So typically at this point, you will either be rushing and finishing really early, you've got time left, but maybe making some silly mistakes, and also maybe then struggling to go back and check over. So checking is something that we're going to be looking at today, because if you have 10 minutes at the end, that's great, but if you don't know how to check your work, they're kind of a wasted 10 minutes. If you're just going back and doing the same sums over and over again, it's not the most effective 10 minutes. If you're spending too long on a question, then you're probably missing out on ones later on. So that means that you are doing really well on maybe 75% of the paper, and then you have to rush all the end. And if you have to rush all of the end, you're not putting your best into it. And those end questions, some of them might be tricky, but some of them might be easy marks. And you don't want to miss those easy marks because you spent ages on a shape question earlier on. And that's typically one of my students spends a long time on the shapes, and then we miss out on some of the easier stuff, or easier to them, at the end. The second one, and one we hear a lot of on 11 plus journey, is silly mistakes. Now, silly mistakes are important to recognize, because by reducing the number of silly mistakes, we boost our score, but you also need to know where to check. Because if you've got an hour's long paper and you've only got 10 minutes to check, well, how do you know where you need to look to find those silly mistakes? And a bit of a clue, it tends to be at the start. So those questions that you're thinking, they're really easy numeracy questions, I could do those with my eyes closed, you often will miss out those simple working out steps, and that will mean you'll make a silly mistake. So again, being able to go back and just check maybe the first 10 questions of the paper, if you know I typically make a silly mistake in that first 10 questions, you've got more chance of finding it, and therefore you've got more chance of gaining those marks. So silly mistakes is something that we want to watch out for. Not understanding the question or misreading the question. Now, at year 5, you will often have gone through a lot of papers or a lot of practice questions. And sometimes you can come up with a practice question and go, oh, that was the same as this one that I did. And you start answering it the same way, and actually it's not the same. And that is where you've misread the question. You've read the question you want to answer because you remember how to do it, and you remember maybe the mistake you made last time. And it's not the same question, and you end up getting confused. Or it could be a very long question, and in year 4 we typically come across those. So in year 4 we start to move into more wordy problems, questions that just have loads of information. And sometimes it can be hard to understand what that question wants you to do. Right? I'm being told all of this information about a train. What do you want me to work out? If you're doing a train timetable question. That kind of brings me on to number 4, which is information overload. You know those questions, and I've got a couple of them in the stuff that I've pre-released, those questions that give you far too much information. So Charlie's going to have a birthday party. She's going to invite 16 of her friends, and 12 of them are going to be boys and 4 of them are going to be girls, and she's making some cakes and she's going to do it in a ratio. Large amounts of that question you would not need. But you're so busy going, oh, I've got to do the question, I've got to pick all the bits of information out, that sometimes those numbers might be confusing. You might get a bit of information overload. We get it in math just as much as you do in English. And then number 5 is that not writing or drawing your working out. And you'll see when I do some of these math questions, I do a lot of drawing. And I do that because it helps me to understand what the question is asking. So really that's my reading through, thinking about the question. But lots of people miss that step out. And if you miss that step out, you might not fully be able to work out where you're going in the question. So always writing and drawing your working out. Yes, it takes an extra couple of seconds. But if we go back to the first one, is there any point spending a minute on a question if it's going to be wrong because you haven't read it? You've made a silly mistake, or you've not drawn out that working. You've just wasted that minute. Whereas if we spent an extra 10 seconds reading through, drawing it out, pulling the right information out, checking, making sure, then you've wasted maybe 10 seconds wasted because you've got the right answer. You've not wasted it at all. So do think about that payoff in terms of timing. Okay. Now, ways that we can help. I'm pretty sure there's meant to be an S, but my computer's corrected it to a Z because it's America. So, categorize. You might be thinking, what do you mean, Gemma? What is categorizing in math? Well, it's coming up with the style of question. So I've mentioned a couple of them in here. We've got ratio style questions. We might have train timetable style questions. You'll see as I go over the questions later, I classify things as people hour questions. We might have shape questions. You might have graph questions. If you can go through with mum or dad and look through your papers that you've previously done, or questions or workbooks, and if you find a whole chunk of stuff that maybe is all time related, then you know that you need to work on time. Or maybe mum and dad have gone over those questions and said, look, you've made lots of mistakes on time questions. That's something we're going to focus on. Now, you might have already gone through time, might have done it before, but going over it again might have a different way of doing it. So maybe a different technique, or maybe a different way of breaking the question down. But by being able to categorize, you can then go in the exam, oh, I know that that is a train timetable type question, and I know that I spent time working on that question, so therefore I probably need to spend a bit more time in the exam. So for mum and dad, those would be something that I would really work on, is to make sure that your child understands what are the types of questions that they maybe need to spend a little bit of time checking or a little bit more time working on. That comes along with my second point, which is a timer. Now, as we start to get to year 5, and this is really specific for year 5. For year 4, if you're sitting in year 4, I really wouldn't be using a timer at this point. You don't need to. But as you start to get to year 5, the exams are a certain amount of time, and therefore we want to see how long it's taking you to do certain parts of the paper. So with my students, and it's something that I do with mine, is I will put a timer on. I'll also do the paper at the same time, and we'll see who reaches a line that we've drawn in the paper, typically around halfway, and we'll write the time when we get there. And that tells me, as when I go through and mark, or how long did it take for them to do the first part of the paper. And it also tells you as a student how long you took to do the first part of the paper. So if you took 20 minutes to do the first part, 40 minutes to do the second part, but you still hadn't finished, there's something in that second part that's taking you a really long time. If you spent 10 minutes in the first half, 50 minutes in the second half, but you made loads of silly mistakes in the first half, that tells us you need to go back and check. So by working out how long it's taking maybe to do a page, maybe to do half the paper, a quarter of the paper, by timing it, you can start to work out, okay, where do I need to spend a bit more time? Where do I need to check? Where do I need to speed up? And with the multiple choice style questions, so for 11 plus, for the grammars, you're looking at a mark per question. So if you're looking at multiple choice style, that's what you're looking for. If it's taking you a really long time to find 1 mark, you might be missing 3 marks later on because you might not be able to reach those questions. And of course, once you finish the paper, or once they say pens down, you've got to make sure you mark in and finish the whole thing. Even if you don't know, just put A, B, C, just mark in the letters. Don't leave it blank. But if you'd reach there by not spending so long on one of those questions because you're aware of your time, then you've got more chances of scoring. Ways to help: checking backwards or checking a different way. If you are checking your questions and you're using the exact same sums, you're unlikely to see your mistakes. So if it's one of those ones right at the start, it's a simple numeracy, and maybe it's 64 plus 53, and you do the exact same thing, okay, 64, and I'm going to add the 53, you're likely to make the same mistake, not to be able to see where you made the mistake the first time because ultimately you've got an answer in front of you. But if you took your answer and you took away 53 and you saw, okay, do I get back to 64? Then that checking backwards is going to show you if you've made a mistake. Maybe you might try a different method of addition. Maybe use column addition to start with, and this time you're going to add the tens together and then you're going to add the units together, and you're going to do it as a kind of Singapore style. So using a different method or checking it backwards will help you to pick up any silly mistakes that you've made. Everybody makes silly mistakes. I make silly mistakes. I'm likely to make a silly mistake at some point when I'm teaching. But that doesn't mean that you can't go back and check it. So if you can have a good method of checking, especially at the start, you may have made those mistakes because you were rushing through the paper, start the paper, everybody else is going, you're thinking, oh, I probably need to speed up a bit. If you go back and check those, and you check them backwards or you check them using a different method, you're more likely to pick up your silly mistakes. Using the answers to help you. So for those of you that are taking multiple choice, you will be given the multiple choice answers. And in some regards, this can be really helpful. And we talk sometimes in verbal reasoning or non-verbal about elimination, but we don't really talk about it so much in math. Occasionally there are some eliminations, some really useful getting rid of answers, especially if you need to make an informed guess. So you know you're spending too long on a question, you want to finish the paper, you're going to ring it and go back to it, but just for now you're going to put down an answer, or you're going through, you've got the last minute before the question finishes and you know you're between two, well, you've got a 50% chance. But if you're between 5, then you've got a much lower chance. So make sure that you have used those answers to help you. And again, I've got a couple of examples that I'll be doing on the whiteboard in a moment. And then this comes with a warning. Some tricks help. And I'm going to go through some of the tricks that I use, tips and tricks, but if you can't remember them, it's not going to help. So at this point in the year, lots of people start talking, and maybe friends and family and tutors start talking about tips and tricks which can help speed you up. And definitely they can. And there's types of things that I'll show you in a moment can help you to speed up. But it can also cause confusion as you try to remember that trick. So, for example, find 8% of 25 can be reversed, and you can find 25% of 8. Now, you might be used to doing this 8% of 25 by, first of all, finding 10%, and then maybe finding 1%, and then timesing that 1% to give 2% and taking it away. And that might be the method that you have followed from year 4 through to year 5. And then you might hear about this new trick where we reverse the numbers. So we're looking at 25% of 8. Now, that speeds you up because 25% is a quarter of 8 is easier to remember, or easier to work out, sorry. But if you can't remember it in the exam, then it might end up causing you a bit of a problem, because you might be thinking, what do I need to do with that? Well, I know it's reversing, but I don't know if it's 25 lots of 8. I don't know if it's 8 divided by 25. I don't know how to apply it. So over the next couple of months, and if you're looking at this in year 4, again, same thing really applies. Some of these tricks will be useful, and some of them will make sense, and some of them might not, and some of them might be harder for you to do than your standard method. So whilst I like tips and tricks because they speed you up and they can provide a really useful way of checking, and they can help you to check you're working and maybe be a different way to what you've worked out, or maybe they can be the first way and you can use a different way to check. But if you can't remember the tricks, you might struggle to be able to remember them, and that might cause more of a stress in the exam. So different people have different ways of doing these, and what I would say is that it is important to have your method and also the maybe the trick method, but be aware that if you can't remember the trick method but you can only remember the method you've been using, that's fine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to swap over. I'm just going to do this for a moment. If I swap over to the whiteboard paper that I have got pre-prepared. Let's have a look. And this has the math questions that we have previously put up on the group. I know somebody's just asked, is the recorded session available? Yes, it is. Our sessions are all available in the group. They are automatically recorded and they are done. If you are watching this on replay, you'll be watching it in the group. And if you go to the videos file in the group, then it is available there. If you are watching it on recorded, again, as I said before, give me a hashtag replay so that I know that that's what we're looking at. Okay, so here we are. So these are our tricky math questions. And if this is the first time that you're seeing these and you want to go away and work on them on your own, this would be the point where I would go back to this video a little bit later, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be going through these questions. These questions are available on the group. So if you want to go away, you want to try them, you want to come back, please do so. All right. But otherwise, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them and I'm going to show you a little bit about how I would do this. Now, what that means is I'm going to look down for a little bit at the same time. So some of these questions I've chosen because they match some of the concepts that I was talking about earlier. So this first one, Halim grows a sunflower, is quite a lot of information. It's quite a lot of stuff. So if we were looking to do this question, what we might be doing is getting rid of a lot of the information. So Halim grows a sunflower which he measures each week. Not that important. After 8 weeks, also not important to the question, it is this amount tall. That's useful to the question. And in the next week, it grows a further, again, I'm taking the words out, 19 centimetres. How many more centimetres must it grow before it is 2 metres tall? Now, one of the things that you might do is see that 8 weeks and think, that's a number. I probably need to do something with that number, but you don't. There's no need for it. So with this one, it is actually a fairly simple numeracy question. We've got 1.32 meters and we're adding 19 centimeters. So it does require you to know that 19 centimeters into meters, but as long as we can do that and we can do the addition, and then we're looking at how much does 2 meters from 2 meters, how much is the addition? So 9 plus 2, 9, 10, 11. As I said, I will be working these out live. 3, 4, 5, that's 5, that's 1.51. So there, 1.51. And we're looking at, okay, it depends on how you want to do it. You can do it column. I do a little bit of a different way. So again, useful for checking, but I would go, okay, 1.51 plus 0.9. Now I do it as something called a skip count. I teach both, but that would give me to 1.6, 1.6 plus 0.4. Or I could do it this way, which is carrying over, give that to a 10, take that to a 9, over here. Oh, there we are. And we could be able to work out, now I'm hoping this comes back, our math questions. Right, I've just lost internet on my whiteboard, but I will be back. I'm just going to sort it out. Give me one moment. There we are. So somebody has come up with that answer for us, which is that 0.49, which is our 2. So if you just bear with me for one moment, I'm going to try and get these slides back up. I've just lost the internet, but I will be back. All right. So I'm just going to pause for a moment. Let me sort this out. All right, here we are. Okay, we'll be back up in a moment. And as someone has said, yep, the units is important. So you could be given the answer as 0.49 meters, or you could be looking at 49 centimeters. All right. And so with this one of the things that might be important would be the checking. So you might be thinking, oh, do I do the same thing in order to check? Well, not quite. Maybe you would think about 0.49 and plus on that 1.51, and that would get you back to the 2. And it's a way of just checking, a quick version of checking your answer, because kind of a simpler numeracy question might be one where you make a silly mistake. Okay, so it's not one where we're going to do it faster, it is one where we're going to check it a different way. So doing it in reverse, doing it backwards would be a way of checking. Again, a different way of adding it or a different way of taking away. So making sure that we are doing this in a way that allows us to do a different sum, ultimately, to be able to check. All right, let's just reshare. We'll be back. Okay. There we are. Perfect. So the second one is that making sure that you draw out or think out or write out. So this is a 4x4x4 cube made of 1 centimeter cubes. The outside is red. There's quite a few versions of these. And how many of those 1 centimeter cubes are going to have 2 sides painted red? Perfect. And can someone just tell me? Here we are. There we are. Yes, you can see me. Perfect. All right. So with this, you might be sketching out a little cube just to be able to see what does it look like when you've got a 4x4x4. So if we've got a 4x4x4, that means that you have 4 cubes going each way. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I just focus on one of those spaces, I can see that it's asking how many cubes will have exactly 2 sides painted red. Well, not this side, not this side, not this side, not this side, because they only have 1. Not this side, because it has round. Not this side, because it goes round. Not this side, not this side. And then I can start to think out, okay, can I imagine the rest of the sides of the cubes? So this would be an example of where if we can see in front of us, we can start to work out. And what I'll do is I will release, after I've done this video, all of the answers. Okay, so for those of you who are trying to work it out for me, we will I'll publish the answers so you can check. Now this third one is pretty tricky, and there's a lot of information in it. So we have got A, B, C, D being a 4-digit number. The first digit is a quarter of the last digit. Second digit is 1 less than the first digit. When you multiply it by 4, its digits appear in reverse order. Not all the digits are the same. This is a long question. And it is one where you want to take every single piece of information separately. So if the first digit is a quarter of the last digit, then we end up with the last digit having to be 4 times the first, if you think about it in reverse. So if my first one is 1, then my last version is there. And if my first one is 2, then my last is 8. Now it can't be any other number. in A or D. It can only be 1 and 2 in the first and 4 and 8 in the last. Because if I had 3 here, well, 4 3s are 12, and I can't have 12 in a 1-digit number. So I know that I've limited my options to a 1, a 2, a 4, and an 8. If the second digit is 1 less than the first digit, then again, you're looking at it being a 0, or you're looking at it being a 1. They haven't told us anything about that third digit. So we've either got 1 0 something 4 to 1 something 8. And that is the kind of logical part of it. The rest of it becomes a little bit of a trial. So they know that if you times it by 4, the digits appear in reverse order. Now, if I times anything ending in a 4 by 4, then my digit will end in a 6, because 4 4s are 16. It doesn't start with a 6. So I can get rid of that option. So now I'm left with 2 1 something 8. If I times 8 by 4, I get 32, and my start digit is a 2. So therefore I have selected this. So I've got 2 1 something 8. And a couple of people have worked it out for us as well. So once you get that 2 1 something 8, then you need to start to work out what that middle unknown number is. And really, it's a little bit of trial and error. And that's where that time starts to creep in. And that's where if there were answers, you might be looking to the answers and saying, well, which ones of them don't have a 2 1 something 8 in it? So we know that none of the digits are the same. So it can't be a 1. It can't be a 2. We start at a 3. And ultimately, what we do is we times this by 4 and see, does it come out as a palindrome? Move up, times the 4. Keep going, and eventually, as lots of people have said, we come out with 2178. So that is a test in numeracy, and it's a test of decoding all of those instructions. But it's also worth thinking that takes a little bit of time. So if you are somebody who would struggle to do those multiplications, then you might think, okay, this is one that I'm going to use the answers for. This is one that I am going to maybe come back to. This one's that taking a little bit of time. The perimeter of a rectangle is 14 centimeters. So again, this is one I would draw out for, because when I am trying to work out shape, it's really useful for me to draw. So I know that if I go from here all the way around, like wrapping a piece of ribbon, then it's going to be 14 centimeters to go all the way around the outside. And if the length of it is 2 centimeters longer than the width, so you could use an X, you can use a question mark. I'm going to use an X here. And if I call the width X, then my length will be X plus 2. And it's a rectangle, so I know it's the same. Now, once you've got this part written down, it becomes a little bit easier, because we know that X plus X plus X plus 2 plus X plus 2 gives us 14. And that allows us to work out the rest of it, because we can make an algebraic equation. So 4x plus 4 equals 14. Do that as a rearrangement. 4x equals 10. Do the division to find us x. So with this one, the drawing out becomes quite important, because if I tried to work that out in my head, I might have struggled. I might have forgotten things like the idea of the rectangle being the same on either sides. So making sure that those lines are the same. Or I might have gotten a bit confused with all of the numbers. Now, once you've got to finding x, you've still not got the answer. And this is often what happens with that rushing. So once you've found x, you might go, ah, got the answer. But that's not what they've asked for. And it is why I recommend underlining what we're trying to find. They asked for the area of that rectangle. They didn't ask for what x is. So once you have found the x, then you need to do an extra step. So if you are going through and you're rushing through, because maybe it's near the start or you're running out of time. You might miss that extra piece of information. And that means you've done all this work, but you haven't got the right answer. So do make sure that you are looking, okay, they've asked me for the area. And when you're going back, you're checking, is this an area or is it just that I found X? Okay, then we've got this last one. And I'm going to show you 2 ways to do it. As I said, math, always several ways to do things. One of them I think is easier, and one of them I think is a little bit more tricky. So it says, and again, these are available in the group as part of the post, so you can look at them a little bit bigger in case they're a bit small on this screen. So it says, I bought a packet of fruit gums and ate 2 of them secretly in my music lesson. Shouldn't be eating fruit gums in a music lesson. At break, I shared a third of the remaining fruit gums with my friends. And then I finished the fruit gums, eating an equal amount of each in the next 4 lessons. So again, it's very wordy. What is the smallest number of fruit gums that could have been in the packet? And again, smallest number is really important here because there's lots of options that you can get. So you can look at it algebraically. And let me show you what that would look like. It's not the way that I would use to work it out. I would use number machines because I find them easier. But if you were to do it algebraically, you've got a pack of fruit gums and you eat 2 of them in music. Think about it this way. Then you share a third of the remaining ones with your friends. So a third goes off this way and we end up with 2/3 of what we started with. So that's 2/3 of x minus 2. And then you eat the remainder. And once you eat the remainder, let me see if I can make it. Then you end up dividing by 4. Right. The next one's slightly bigger. So we could work this out by using there we go. We could work this out by using algebra. But ultimately, we don't need to work this out using algebra. Instead, what we can do is we can do it via using a number machine. Okay. All right, so people are saying they can't see the questions, so let me move them down and make them a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. So if we're going to do this by using a number machine, then ultimately I'm starting with a certain number. During music, I'm going to eat 2 of them. At break, I'm going to share a third of them. So that means I'm dividing by 3. I'm going to times by 2. And then I need to be able to divide by 4, sharing them equally in my next 4 lessons. So to be able to find out, they've said the smallest number of fruit gums. So I want the smallest whole number to come out of my number machine. And then what I can do is reverse it. So if I reverse, I go 1 times 4, gives me 4. I'm always flipping the signs as I go backwards. So this is like a reversal. It's a bit like a reversal algebra, but it's just shown in a different way. So instead of dividing by 4, I times by 4. Instead of dividing by 3, I'm going to times by 3 and then divide by 2. So times by 3 gives me 12. Divide by 2 gives me 6. So 6 pops out of this number machine. Instead of minusing 2, I'm going to add 2. And I come out, as some people said, with 8. Now, if I wanted to check that, I would go the other way round. So let's put it back into the question. So I buy 8 fruit gums and I eat 2 of them in music. That means I have 6 left. I share 1/3 of the remaining fruit gums with my friends, so I only get 2/3 of those. Divide 6 by 3, gives me 2, times by 2 gives me 4. I then eat an equal amount in the next 4 lessons, but I eat 1 in every lesson. So again, a different way of seeing it, a different way of drawing it out, maybe a different way of checking. Okay. Right, so these ones might be a little bit bigger. You can just let me know in the comments, are these big enough to see? Someone let me know. Do I need to make them a bit bigger? A little bigger. Okay, that's fine. I can make them a little bigger. And let's just expand them a bit so that people can see. All right. So here we are. We have got each shelf of a bookcase contains 12 books. The librarian takes out 21 books, rearranges the remaining books so that all of the shelves... Wow, that is a long question. So let's draw it. Because again, it's the way that I think. So I've got some shelves and each of my shelves have 12 books. I don't know how many shelves there are, but I'm going to put in 4. 4 is not one of my answers, so then I know it's not right. The librarian's going to take out 21 books. She's then going to rearrange so that everything has 8 except the last one. Okay. Now, that's confusing if I had to work it out without the answers. But I've got the answers. They're down here. So I can use those answers to try and figure out the question. I could use, again, some complex algebra to be able to work it out. I don't need to because I've got the answers here. So if I start off with 5 shelves, that's 5 lots of 12. So I'm looking at 5 times 12. If I minus 21 from 5 lots of 12, I am going to end up with, let me do my working over here. So I've got 60 and I'm going to minus 21. So let's carry. Let's put that down. Let's do a 9. 5 minus 2 gives us 39. So I've got 39. Does 39 equal 4 of those shelves with 8? So 4 8s plus 11. Oh, that should be a times. Make that more obvious here, times. So 4 times 8, because 4 of the shelves, remember we said there's 5 shelves, definitely 5 shelves, plus 11. Well, 4 8s is 32, plus 11 is not 39. I don't need to work out what it is, I just need to know it's not 39. So that means it cannot be A. I can try 6. So 6 times 12 minus that 21. And at the same time, I'm doing 8 times by 6 plus 11. So again, this is using your answers to be able to work out what the question is trying to say. If we tried to do this without the answers, it would have taken a lot longer. But instead, by using the answers, I can go through, put each of them in. There's a lot of people are saying we're looking at B, because we're looking at 6 lots of 12 minus 21 should equal 8 lots of 6 plus 11. So these are, again, they're simultaneous equations, could have been worked out algebraically, simultaneously, but actually we've got the answers here. Let's not make it more complex for ourselves. Now, the last 1, 2, 3 are, as I said before, those types, and I'm just talking about categorizing questions. Each of these has a category for me, and I picked these because these are some of the ones that some of my students traditionally struggle with. So we've got the first lot, which is called a changing mean for me. We've got the second one, which is what I would call a people hour question. Changing mean, people hour. And then we have got a trains leaving at the same time, which I'm not going to say what I call it as a type because that kind of tells you how you do it. So a changing mean, once I've recognized it's a changing mean question, becomes so much easier because I know that I have a way to work out those changing mean questions. Now, if I was looking at it and going, okay, changing mean, I typically don't get these right, or I typically spend a little bit longer on these, then I would be making sure that I check it, or I'd be making sure that I spend a little bit longer. And if I don't come out with an answer that's in the answers, then I probably would be going back instead of just trying to guess it. So for my changing mean questions, I know that mean, average, is all the numbers added together divided by the number of numbers. And it's told me the number of numbers. Here is 12. So if I wanted to undo a mean, so if I wanted to undo it, I would say, so this is sum of numbers divided by number of numbers to equal my mean. So I'm going to rearrange it and I am going to multiply by the number of numbers. So 65 times that by 12. Then I'm going to remove my number y from this set and I've got a new mean. Now you've got to be a little bit careful because remember that y was removed from the set. So now the set is 11 numbers. So if the mean has changed to 63, I also want 63 times by, but not 12, because we removed that one number, times that by 11. And then I want to find the difference between them. Now, the difference between them should be our 87. So again, we've got that. Now to check what we could do is we know we've got 12 numbers, 65. We know what the total is. We should be able to take away the 87 and get the 63 times 11. So I could do 65 times 12, find my answer, minus 87, divide by 11, and hopefully get 63. Might take a little bit of time, but if it's something that you know, that you have categorized as being tricky, that time spent might be worth it. It might not, because remember, we're making sure on our timings as well, but ultimately it depends on where your areas of focus sit. So we've done this multiplication, we took away the 87, we should end up with the totals. That might be good enough for checking for most of you, but if it's one that really you struggle with, you then might want to divide by 11 and see if you turn up with 63. People hour questions. All people hour questions. I've actually seen someone do it quite differently. So I'm going to show you two ways on this because I discovered maybe a bit of a different way of doing it, because I've always done it one way and then a student of mine showed it to me a different way. But they're all follow the same format. So they're all normal, easy to be able to recognize. So it comes in a librarian shelves this many books in, or 5 librarians shelve this many books in this many hours. If one librarian was ill, how long would it take the remaining ones? Or the pile of food feeds 12 rabbits for 15 days. How much can it feed 20? So I'll show you the way that I do it. I'll show you the way that my student does it, because they're both really useful. So people hours. For me, this is rabbit days. So I know that my pile of food feeds 12 rabbits for 15 days, and therefore I can work it out in terms of rabbit days. Sounds a bit odd, but if I've got rabbit days. So I have got 12 times by 15, which I'm going to work out. So 15, do 12. I might as well do it as, again, different ways to do multiplication. but I would maybe do it as a 10 and then a 2 and then add together. Again, just showing you different ways of doing it. Not necessarily the way I'd work it out in an exam, but I do know that double 15 is 30, and I do know that 10 lots of 15 is 150, and if I combine them, then I know that I've got the answer. Might not be the way I'd do it, but it's a way that I can do it to check. So 5, 6, 7, 8, like so. Okay. Then I'm looking at how long can it feed the same for 20 rabbits? Well, I need to work out 20 rabbits times something gives me my 180 rabbit days. So what is my something that sits in there? Divide through, and as many of you have been saying, we get 9. Now someone showed me a different way, and I thought it was quite good. They used something which is called inverse proportion, but they did it in this way. They showed it as though it was a ratio. And they said, well, whatever I do on this side, I do the opposite on the other side. So as I'm going from 12 rabbits to 20, now you can only times or divide in a ratio, we can't add or minus. I would first of all divide by 6 to get 2. And I do the opposite sign on this side, so I times by 6. And then from the 2, they times by 20. Sorry, times by 10 to get 20. And so therefore they divided by 10 on this side. Different way of seeing it. Maybe some of you use it, but different ways of checking. So if you've worked them out both these ways, then you've been able to check it, get the same answer, you know you're correct. And then the last one. The last one, again, often people will do using maybe a bit of a slow method, or maybe a method that takes longer. These are our lowest common multiple questions. Because kind of the way that you think you might want to do it, and it's got something else in it as well, actually. Choose it for this. It's got a lot of numbers. You want to make sure you've got the right numbers. So again, you want to go through and get rid of anything that isn't important. It doesn't matter that it's platform 5, and it doesn't matter that it's platform 8. Those aren't the important things. The important things are the times. So don't get confused with the 5s and the 8s. That's what they want you to do. They want you to be timesing 5 and 8, and they want you to be doing 5 times 6. None of that is useful. But the important parts are the 6, the 10, and the 1557. Now, some people I see start and write down 1557 for the first train, 1557 for the second train, and they will try and add 6 and add 10 until they get to one that looks the same. It takes a long while to do. Keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Now, if you're stuck in an exam and you can't remember the trick on how to do it, then that's the best way to do it, because ultimately it's going to get you the answer. But if you're going to make it a little bit quicker, you're wanting that lowest common multiple. Lowest common multiple between 6 and 10 is 30. Add 30 onto your time, and it gives you, as lots of people are saying, 1627. Now, these answers here, they're all chosen to confuse somebody. So I actually did these answers myself, so I know what's been done. And what we've got is, we've got one that's an hour, because 6 times 10 gives us 60. So in case you'd not found the lowest common multiple, you just found a common multiple, you might be more likely to go for that one. If you had panicked and just added some things together, so I think here I added 6 and 5 or 6 and 10, you'd end up with 1608. If you times the wrong one, so if you hadn't gotten rid of platform 5 and platform 8, so maybe you did 5 times 8 and you ended up with 40, then you'd end up with one of these answers. So it shows the importance of reading that question. And the last thing that I want to look at, or the last thing that I want to go through, is just a reiteration of those slides. So hopefully, as I said, I'll pop the answers down later today once everyone's had a chance to go through those questions. But, oh, not that one. But if we're going to remember, and we want to go back over our techniques and our ways to help, we've got categorize. The last 3 that we looked at were categories of questions. Those are really useful to be able to know where your categories that you might need to spend a little bit more time on. Timer, making sure that you're doing it the quickest but most effective way. And some of those tips and tricks that I've shown you, or some of those speeding up methods, might not be remembered in the exam. And if they're not, that's fine. You go back and you do it the way that you know how to. But ultimately, let's see that we're getting through the test in the right amount of time. Ideally, we leave 5-10 minutes at the end to check. And those checks need to be where you typically make those mistakes. Checking backwards, checking using a different method. I showed you a couple of different ways of doing multiplications or additions or being able to do certain types of questions. So going backwards, instead of doing the same thing, instead of checking using the same way and therefore meaning that that's a mistake. Using the answers to help. We showed a couple of those where actually you just plugged the answers in, didn't have to do a really complicated algebra. And then that warning, remember, if you cannot remember the trick, then it is not a trick to you. So therefore, if you are struggling to speed up the last one using the lowest common multiple, you can't remember, is it a highest common factor, is it a lowest common multiple, then counting forward is a way to work it out. It takes longer, and you do need to think, am I going to be spending that time, maybe wasting that time for the end, or is it you've got that time and you can use it, in which case that's the method you remember, then do that method. So tricks are useful, they can help, but not if you can't remember them. All right. As always, thank you to 11 Plus Jenny for allowing me to come on. I will be putting the answers to our questions up a little bit later. It will be at the end of today. That allows people who haven't seen the questions or haven't been on the live to be able to work through them if they wish. So they will be up. And yep, if you need any kind of advice, then do let us know. There's always great advice on the 11 Plus Journey, and so I would always make sure that you ask us on there, and there's always people willing to help. So thank you very much. Thanks for joining in, and I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.